Good morning. As I predicted last week, the provincial election will take place on May the 10th. It's going to be a tough campaign, and likely it's going to be a rough, tough, dirty campaign, back in the old British Columbia basics, godless socialism or virginal free enterprise. But that won't fool anybody who's an observer of politics. First, though, I want you to hear the specific issues which Premier Bennett says are the reasons he called the election.
It is time for us, as a party, to ask for a new mandate from the people of British Columbia. I'm asking the people of British Columbia to endorse the policies of shared distribution through the BC Resource Investment Corporation. I'm going to ask the people of British Columbia to give us a mandate to protect and develop in your interests the resources of British Columbia. I'm going to ask the people of British Columbia to vote for what I believe is and give us a mandate on what I believe is a record of sound, responsible management and tax adjustments which mean lower cost of government to the people of British Columbia, and give us a clear message that they wish us to continue on this course of lesser government and more opportunity for individuals. I will be, following this statement, calling on His Honour the Lieutenant Governor to dissolve the legislature today by proclamation. Election day will be Thursday, May 10th.
There isn't any doubt about it. These are the basic reasons for which Premier Bennett has called the election, but why for May 10th? Now, first of all, on both those issues, BRIC and the control of natural resources, Premier Bennett has a couple of good campaign propaganda points which he will hammer all the way through, on which he can catch Barrett and company slightly off base on their turnabout on the BRIC resource shares and the handling of that. And also on a remark Mr. Barrett made some time ago that if the federal government were to nationalize the oil and other major natural resources of this country, he would hand British Columbia's resources into that federal pot. That, of course, will haunt Mr. Barrett throughout the campaign. But beyond that, why May the 10th? Well, it must be obvious to you, even though Premier Bennett didn't mention or whisper a word about it last night. There is a federal election on May 23. The NDP, the Liberals, although they don't matter in British Columbia, and the Conservatives are totally committed to a federal campaign. The NDP will find it very difficult indeed to split their organisations and, as Alec MacDonald told us yesterday morning, to raise money to finance and run a normal, all-out provincial campaign. And, of course, during this morass, might I say dog's breakfast of propaganda, which will be thrown at the people of British Columbia between now and then, the name social credit will apply only to one election, the provincial election, while the NDP energies will be dissipated here, there, and everywhere. That is a major reason, in my humble opinion, to call it now. And of course, Premier Bennett is just a trifle afraid of an economic turn-down later in the year. And he may well be looking at the labour problems in British Columbia and thinking, my God, if the lumber companies don't give the IWA $1.50 this summer, and if the pulp unions go out, and if Fryer and the boys escalate again the Simon Fraser situation, who knows about the Essential Services Act? He can come back if he gets his mandate and he's home free to do what he thinks is best from a social credit point of view. Why a dirty campaign? Well, I want you to remember about last night's first-class broadcast on the NewsHour with the full 20-minute speech, most of which was social credit campaign material, apart from the election announcement. And I want you to remember, as you see this clip, that Premier Bennett didn't even have a snicker on his face when he made the debate proposition.
However, I feel it would be useful, with the fundamental philosophical issues we have before us, to have an additional informative debate. And so I'm challenging the leaders of the New Democratic Party to a debate to take place on the Monday immediately preceding the election. I'm challenging the leaders, and I say leaders because it must involve the leaders who have shaped and direct the policy of the new Democratic Party. I include Dave Barrett because it is he who has offered the resources, the petroleum and gas resources of British Columbia, to Ottawa in the name of National Socialism. I wish to debate this issue. To the architect of the NDP program of nationalization and government takeover, the grand architect of the last government, and still the strong presence of the new Democratic Party, Bob Williams, I extend the same opportunity to debate the issue of the BC Resources Investment Corporation and individual ownership versus big government ownership or socialism. And to Jim Kinnaird, who has held a number of rallies around the province supporting the new Democratic Party, I wish to extend to him also his participation in this debate to discuss the Essential Services Act and how I believe it will meet the needs of British Columbians in a positive way. This offer and this challenge is open with the one proviso that all three must be present in the debate, and I think 3-1 is pretty fair odds for the new Democratic Party.
Barrett, Bob Williams, and Jim Kinnaird, you've got to admire the gall of Premier Bennett's speechwriters. I'll give you my views on that in a minute or two. But first of all, I want you to hear the equal time cheap shot that Bill King, quite properly in my view, took last night.
One last brief question. Are you sorry he didn't list you for the TV debate? Bill King was not in the list of people.
Well, there again, you know, how foolish can you be? He's suggesting that Bob Williams must come and Jim Kinnaird must come. I suppose the thing for Dave Barrett to do now would say, okay, I'll come provided Bob Summers comes and Jack Davis comes. How foolish can we be?
Unfortunately, that will not be the last heard of this type of exchange throughout this campaign. And I don't blame King for making that particular remark, because if Mr. Bennett had cared to look at the facts, of course, Barrett is always slightly on edge with Kinnaird. Only last week in my program, Barrett sliced up by calling John Fryer Foolish one of Kinnairds right-hand men. Where is Bob Williams now? Who knows? But I think we could say quite safely as observers and reporters that Williams had his throat cut by Alec MacDonald, and the Barrett people in the Vancouver East constituency and elsewhere in the party some considerable time ago. But there it is. It's up there. If Premier Bennett really wants a debate, let me allow myself to make this offer on behalf of BC television in our prime time at night. I'm quite sure that Mr. Barrett and Mr. Bennett would achieve a much more straightforward object of a face-to-face debate with an impartial moderator who at this very moment is inclined to say a plague on both their houses. In the studio this morning, however, we have a man who's got a sunshine budget, or maybe it's a sunset budget, clutched hotly in his hand, and his name is Evan Wolfe. He is the Minister of Finance in the caretaker government at the moment, and the budget, and speaking technically, is as of this moment right now not worth the paper it is written on. And the social credit will go into the campaign waving this great bunch of goodies. I'm inclined to start a new party right now. And I'll tell you what I'll bid you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bid you no sales tax whatsoever. I'll bid you an additional $1,000 in your homeowner grant. And I hope we don't get into a bidding battle between the two major parties in British Columbia with our money and our future. Evan Wolfe next, after this break.
Is it really worth it?
God, no. Yeah.
You see, I've never had any responsibility in my life.
30 seconds.
I've always just
Have a
been
quick
mouthy.
puff, 30 seconds.
No, I'm not puffing this.
Oh, all right, well, open it then for next time. You're all right.
You're feeling better now, Fred?
I'm feeling much better now. You got...
Evan Wolfe is a long-time social credit campaigner. You've won how many elections, Mr. Wolfe?
Jack, I've won 3 and lost 1.
Won 3 and lost
This
1.
is number 5.
Number 5.
Right.
You may well lose this one, you know.
Oh.
Because after all, would you dare to correct my bold statement off the top that your sunshine budget may be a sunset budget and it's not worth the paper it's written on?
I would correct your statement, Jack, that this budget expresses the intention of this government, which was prepared over a long period of time. It puts together what we've really done for the last 3 years in the social credit government of British Columbia, starting from a very difficult situation, and it really shows the results of responsible fiscal management, which really come down to the fact that we have a budget here this year which shows only an expenditure increase of 5%. Now, I think that is commendable. It expresses the intention of this government, and the result of this is very simple: across-the-board reduction in taxes. Now,
what about the second part of my question? Am I not technically correct by saying that this budget, including the current 1% cut on sales tax, which went into effect
midnight, Monday night,
is not worth the paper it's written on, technically and legally speaking?
You put it any way you want to put it. This expresses the measures that are in place at this stage, which would be subject to the government being returned as far as being implemented.
In other words, the $100 homeowner...
Let's not confuse anybody. The sales tax is in effect as of now at 4%.
Agreed.
And the pari-mutuels tax, which was reduced midnight also,
agreed,
is in place at this stage, so that these measures, it is assumed, are in place, and nobody knows what any new government would do in terms of when they came into office.
That's the point, that to regularize the sales tax cut and the pari-mutuel cut and the $100 increase in homeowner grant and your plans to take the cost of education, particularly colleges, off the backs of the taxpayers, and to distribute your $200-odd million surplus funds in various ways, still has to be legalized by the re-elected government.
Let's agree with this, though, that this
budget
was prepared with the intention of proceeding with these measures.
You were forced into the election.
It's just not a bogus budget prepared for the purposes of an election.
Agreed.
We have every intention of proceeding with these measures.
If you win the election.
That's a confusing...
If you win the election.
Fair enough.
And if you don't win the election, another government could come in and say, a plague on the sunshine budget.
Very well could do.
We shall increase the tax to 10% and cut the homeowner grant to zilch.
That's right, yeah.
But I'm right.
That's correct, yes.
The budget at the moment is not worth the paper it's written on.
I would say another government could adopt a different attitude, present a different budget, change the tax measures that were put forward.
What you're telling
Incidentally, there are bills supporting all of these measures that were placed before the House. The tax bills associated with them were placed in the House before it adjourned.
What you're telling me, Mr. Wolfe, and I say this with measured tones and solemnity, that unless I vote social credit, I may not get these goodies.
I don't call them goodies. I call them the return for responsible government, which are reflected in reduced cost of government, reduced size of government, right? And that's really what's happening here.
You've obviously fought 5 campaigns and made many political speeches. Unless I vote social credit, there is no guarantee that I will receive the benefits of responsible government as outlined by you in your budget.
That's correct. Right.
That's what I was asking you 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Good. What do you think about this chintzy offer of the 3-on-1 debate? Pretend there's nobody watching and give me an honest answer.
No, I think that it really, there's a lot of merit in that. Let's face it, that the BC Federation of Labour and Jim Kinnaird have been waging a campaign directed at a potential election.
Right.
Nothing else but.
Bloodshed.
They're part of the NDP caucus, right?
Agreed.
And it's quite appropriate that we have here a potential leader of the NDP. We have here a potential leader of the NDP. Why shouldn't he come up front and debate the matters associated with this election, the Resource Corporation shares, and all the rest of it, along with the current leader? There's more than one potential leader of the NDP, and he certainly is one. So what is wrong with that proposal to suggest that they join together in a debate? As the Premier said, that's reasonable odds, 3-to-1. So I support that.
You may convince yourself, but you'll
But,
never convince any sane person listening.
Well, you're just difficult, that's
no,
all.
the device adopted by the Premier last night was an attempt to get together three disparate members of the NDP.
Oh, let's deal with the other
Kinnaird,
members. Yeah.
Bob Williams, who's long departed the scene of the NDP. We might bring back some of the old social credit people to haunt us.
Who says Bob Williams has long departed the NDP scene?
I have fairly
he's
good
the
knowledge
architect
of
of a
that.
lot of measures that are going on.
You think he's still
And
in power
I
behind
think
the throne?
he, along with Barrett, were the primary forces behind the previous cabinet. They made all of the moves, all of the decisions. Williams was the person who engineered all of the takeovers that that government put together, which really is the focus of what they did in their term of office.
As a
They took
matter of
over
fact,
dozens of companies.
Williams, I suppose, gets the credit for putting together these highly successful industrial operations for which you are now giving the people the shares back in the form of
But
brick.
there is the
that not
issue.
so?
There is the issue of this election. Do people want to have sizable government ownership of these enterprises? Big government, state control. These are, I recognize, political terms. Or do they want to have the continuation of the opportunity for individual ownership, which is what we're proposing in the Resource Corporation share issue?
Well, you have me admit, in my opinion...
And what you want to ask yourself, and the candidates in this coming election is, insofar as the NDP is, if they come to office, what companies, what industries are they going to nationalize and take over again? Because they're going to, Jack. Let's face it, they're going to.
I can see this. I can see this shaping up now. And by the way, I did not like, to be serious for a moment, as a reasonably fair person, the Premier's reference, and I'll tell him this when I see him myself, I suppose, to National Socialism. That left a taste in my mouth. Didn't it leave you a taste in your mouth?
I took no significance
You
from
didn't.
that whatsoever.
And you would not think the
No.
Premier intended to make any snide remarks about National Socialism?
I do think that we have a different breed of socialism in the province of British Columbia than some other provinces,
It's not like Hitler.
and also maybe different than the national.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes,
I think that was a cheap shot. National
Well-
Socialism.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
That was the one thing that really upset me. I mean, the gag about Williams and Company is just a gag as far as I'm concerned. It's not a practical proposition. I'd love to see it. I wouldn't mind. They might well demolish the Premier.
It's an honest offer, which very well may be accepted.
I wonder if your party would take the same kind of honest offer if Mr. Barrett were to say, well, we'll have Premier Bennett, and we'll have Bill Clancy, and we'll have Lydia Arsons, architects of social credit. How about that?
Certainly, well,
Is that a good offer? That would
try
be
it.
3 on 1. eh?
Yeah, right.
Webster and
Okay.
Evan Wolfe. Some details of the budget. We're going to go to the phones this morning, too. Want reasonable, responsible response and questions on the budget. And what do you think of 2 elections at once? 2 for the price of 1 after this break. First of all, Evan Wolfe, on the election again for a moment, please, if you don't mind. You would not disagree with my assessment that to call the election in the middle of the federal campaign, which, by the way, is May 22, it was just a slip of my tongue, May 22, is of great advantage to social credit as the only provincial identifiable party running, not confused with the federal government, with federal election.
I think you could weigh that both ways, Jack. There's, I think, an argument on both sides as to whether there's an advantage or not. It could be somewhat confusing. It's, I don't think, a thing we would want to have happen, except that, you know, we just think it's a time to go. There are important issues that require public definition, and I think that, no, it will confuse some people, but I think the advantages could be weighed both ways.
And you can concentrate on provincial election while the NDP has to concentrate on 2 elections.
Another point, too, is that how many elections do people want to have over a period of time? If we were to have an election in the fall, I think by then they might be tired of elections. We have about 5 of them in the winds right now between Great Britain, Prince Edward Island, the national election, and Alberta just having finished, you know, so think there's something to be said from the public's point of view and having the two almost together.
Now, on the other point, though, which is the question of the labour relations in the province this summer. It'd be nice to get a mandate before you come up into any stormy times with pulp and paper IWA or even this silly thing at SFU.
Jack, that's true. Every summer is looked upon as an important summer for labor. There's more contracts this year. It's true, and I know that obviously union leaders are advocating big increases. Our budget emphasizes the need for really us to not take off at this time in wage or price increases, because it's a two-sided
Nothing
issue.
you can do about prices.
Well, not except through the sort of internal mechanisms we have, the Council of Public Sector Employers and other measures that we're trying to do with prices. But I just say that this budget really is more anti-inflationary insofar as prices are concerned. I would call it an inflation fighter budget because of the tax decreases in it
Wouldn't that
really attacks inflation.
Won't the 4% sales tax cut increase purchases and add fuels to the fire of inflation?
To a degree, this returns itself in consumer spending, but we have a 20% cut in sales tax from 5 down to 4, the lowest rate it's been in 25 years.
And you put it up from 5 to 7 in the first place.
We did because we had to. There's no alternative. And we've since exempted a number of things, dietary products, vitamin products, and so on, and in the intervening period of 3 years, many other items.
You've got money coming out your ears just now, Alec MacDonald tells me. You've got your $260 million surplus, which are one-shot deals.
220.
220?
Yeah.
Wasn't it a total of 265?
No, there's a total of 220 appropriated in two measures here of the previous surpluses. A part of that is in the surplus which is not really declared yet for the year that just finished. Anyway, there's most of that is in job creation projects, accelerating the highway program above and beyond what it was the amount in the budget.
Job creation projects. All I see is $5 million for something.
Well, what about $25 million on top of the highways construction program and $10 million for reforestation?
I'd like to know how much the highways construction was down the year before.
No, it was about $161
$5 million for a job experience program to prepare young people for work. However, are you predicting, the Americans are, quite a rapid turn down in the economy in the last quarter of the year?
As far as British Columbia is concerned, no. We're optimistic about 1979. It might not be quite as strong as 1978. You have the U.S. Housing market and talk of a mild recession or a recession at some point in time in the United States, but when they talk about recession in the United States, they talk about a reduction in growth to 2 or 3%, not minus growth. Now, offsetting that, you have Japan and Europe, which are predicting much better increases in the coming year. So I think we have, on balance, a reasonably strong forecast. We have good intentions of capital investment in the project in the province. We have good consumer confidence indications. So I think we can look forward to a pretty good year.
Just a little bit of money. Every percent you drop sales tax, you lose about, what, $110 million?
130 now.
$130 million. The big bonanza you have, though, for 1980 and also for 1978 was the devaluation of the dollar, which in 1976 you got $71 million in logging tax and timber stands, and in 1980 you're going for $223 million. That saved you bacon. The American lumber market.
Yeah, the surpluses you're talking about, which we've been able to generate on top of this budget, have been created primarily by the increases in the petroleum industry a year ago, and then this immediate past year in the forestry economy. Matter of fact, the resource revenues shown in that budget are up 75% in this year over the year 1975-76.
That's from
75%.
That's from Barrett's Petroleum and BC Petroleum Corporation.
Well,
and from the logging taxes and
right.
royalties.
Timber sales. Right.
You got to give them credit for that BC Petroleum Corporation. That was a bonanza handed to you, wasn't it? To be non-political for a moment.
It's still in place, and it's there for the purpose of collecting appropriate revenues on export sales of natural gas.
He said last night that you people with your resource policy are going to hand the resources back to the oil companies.
At the same time, the contracts that he put together insofar as export of gas are in large question today, because we're finding that the demand on export gas is very difficult to keep up. The revenues from that corporation in the current year expected to be substantially down. So we do have some difficulties in being able to sell.
Easy answer, put up the price to the Americans.
Well, we've just put it up. The National Energy Board just approved an increase.
What's it now?
Yeah, 230 Canadian or something like that.
230 Canadian.
Yeah.
He says that the Mexicans are getting 360. Do you know if that's true?
I couldn't give you the figure, but that's where the competition is coming from.
That's where the competition is
Yes.
coming from. Dirty campaign?
Oh, I
Gonna be
think,
a dirty campaign?
I don't think so. I think
Started off kind of dirty, didn't it?
What do you call dirty?
Oh, this business of...
I think if you start talking about character assassination and that kind of thing, sure. But no, I think it'll resolve itself into the individual ownership issue, the question of whether people want to see this government returned in view of the job it has done in terms of fiscal management and providing opportunity for individuals as opposed to state ownership,
Put it in an
or whether it wants to go back to the former
Good.
type of regime.
All right.
That'll be their choice.
Put it in 2 words. You know, like eventually the ad agencies will, or the politicians will. I say national socialism or virginal free enterprise. And we know that there's neither one of those on either side. That you're almost as involved in corporate management of business in British Columbia as the NDP
Oh,
was.
that's not true. To say that the BC Resource Corp is a classic example of our sincere effort to get the government out of this business.
Mr.
No,
Wolfe.
they've intruded into...
Here you are now, really, and as I'm not a particular person of any particular standards of integrity, but you're saying now, we are going to give you your 5 free shares in Brick, which may well be a good thing. And we're going to give you all the goodies in this budget. And if you don't vote for us, you're going to have National Socialism. Isn't that right?
Well, the NDP party are a logical alternative to those who want to vote in this election. I just say that if they want to have large government, big government, state ownership of resource companies and other industries on an unpredictable basis, well, that's fine. Also, uncontrollable expenditures were the example that they set in a 3-year period. Do you know that in 3 budgets, their actual expenditures were 14% in dollar terms over the budgets that they presented in those 3 years?
What are yours?
14%, under 1%. So, I mean, that gives you the example.
Anywho,
of how
I'll tell you what I'd like to do this morning. You're a big shot in social credit, no doubt about that. Minister of Finance and all the rest of it, high in the cabinet, in the confidence of Premier Bennett. Let's see what people think of you this morning.
Okay.
On the telephone, after this break. Just remembered, haven't you got a thing in your budget here, your proposed budget, about income tax deductions for election expenses to social credit?
Yes, we've proposed an amendment to the Income Tax Act to allow deductibility for provincial income tax of donations to political parties, to provincial political parties.
What's the limit?
The limit, I believe, is $500, and it's graduated, like 75% of the first $100 and so on.
Same as the
It's the
federal?
same as Alberta, similar to Ontario and Quebec. And, of course, the federal already has such a law for national purposes.
Are corporate donations banned under this?
No, but they're no greater than the personal.
$500 maximum?
Yes, right. It may be 600. I'm just trying to recall whether the figure
Well,
is
it's
$500 or 600. Right.
$500 or $600. That,
And-
of course, won't be legal for this election.
Well, it'll require provincial parties to be registered, and then, of course, the agent of a candidate to be registered under some apparatus for this to be
But it
in
won't
place.
be legal for this election now.
It could be made legal retroactively. Oh, yes.
Retroactive
Yes,
legislation.
that's right. Yeah.
So you're advising all your social credit organizers to start whipping it up. Have you formed a receipt for them yet?
No, this requires an undertaking with Ottawa to provide under the collection agreement for this to take place. And I want to emphasize, too, that this same opportunity for donations is available to any provincial party.
Yes,
so
yes.
it really has the same advantage to any candidate in the provincial election.
The NDP, of course, already have the federal contributions towards the political
Yes,
party, which I
right.
presume they can use for
Yeah.
provincial.
Yeah, no.
They can't.
I don't think they could use their national donations for provincial income tax. But that would automatically happen off the national.
Anyway, you won't be able to use this year because it's not legal.
Not at this point, no.
See, I'm still nagging you, but
Yeah.
not what the paper is written on. Now, where am I going? Go ahead to Evan Wolfe, Minister of Finance in the caretaker government of social credit. Is that right? Caretaker government? It is, isn't
We're
it?
still acting as government.
Yeah, but you're the caretaker government.
Well, there's going to be an election. The
See
House
if
is
you win or
dissolved.
lose. Right. Go ahead, ma'am.
Morning.
I am quite perturbed at the government. Just before election time, the welfare recipients were misled in their statement in their welfare.
What does the... Come to the point, ma'am, and we'll try and answer it for you.
Well, it's to do with the budget, because the government before has given the welfare recipients the last time $50. Now this time they misled the whole public concerning assessing light, heat, phone, all the things in their welfare.
You're talking about the new welfare system by which the actual costs of power, telephone, and rent are reimbursed.
We're going to be assessed, and that we would be getting assessed, and that we would get better off, okay, because we're under the poverty level anyway.
Right, that's correct.
Well, anyway, the one child with a family, across the many people that I have talked to, all got $30. That's it.
Well, that must be on the basis of the maximums obtainable.
We're not assessed. They just know there was no maximum. Okay, why could we get $50 a few years ago without assessment and $30 now? Now, that isn't because...
Ma'am, I'm prepared to accept your that on the face value, but I don't want to bog down the program which is taking election reaction right now.
Cut out all needs as well, you see.
Well, tell me, how do you feel about the election being called? Does that please you or not?
That doesn't please me with what they've done to the welfare...
Could I just say one thing, Jack?
Yeah.
There has been a huge increase in the monies provided for the GAIN programs and for human resources. It's up 26% over last year's budget, and to a figure of some $351 million alone for the monies required for what she's talking about. I thought there had been a simplification and improvement in what she was now referring to, so I'm surprised to hear that.
Go ahead, please, from...
Hello?
Where? Revelstoke.
Yeah, Revelstoke. Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Please don't cut me off. I feel...
Just get to the point.
Yeah, this is relevant. Mr. Wolfe,
Yes, sir.
your colleagues are always harping on the fact that when you took office, you took over a financial nightmare, right? Right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, okay.
There's still a debt there of $261 million.
Okay, well, it depends where you get your figures, particularly
Yeah, well, we got them from the Comptroller General.
particularly ICBC, right?
What's your point?
Yeah, well, you use this, I believe you use this as an excuse to raise ICBC rates to scandalous heights. You raise the personal income tax, the provincial sales tax, and other taxes. Now, you boast a surplus of millions of dollars for which you give your government credit, when in fact the surplus is a result of the aforesaid scandalous financial burden you tied around the people's neck.
Well put, sir, to Mr. Wolfe, who will now reply.
Thank you for that question. First of all, it's true that the insurance corporation in a 2-year period under the NDP lost $185 million in a monopolistic situation. That's not easy. This had to be dealt with. Insurance rates were increased, but in the due course, very quickly, compulsory collision was removed and the insurance company was brought into some order of financial stability. It's now breaking even or slightly making $1 or $2 on the lowest rates in Canada in comparable situations.
And you have $570 million in reserve in the insurance corporation.
Now, you've also said that we raised taxes and we're just now bringing them down. They've long since been reduced to the levels below they were at the time the NDP were in power. And the tax reductions in this budget bring it to the second lowest in Canada, with the exception of Alberta, on all tax fronts that anyone you want to approach. We've got the lowest sales tax, the lowest income tax, and so on. So we're far below the rate at which you found the taxes during the previous regime. So I think we shouldn't delude people into thinking that we're just returning now the taxes to the level that they were before.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Good morning. Three quick questions for Mr. Wolfe. I agree with Mr. Wolfe. I'm against strictly big government, but why is it that when we had an anti-inflation board in progress, that the BC Hydro were able to increase children's bus fares, and in fact all bus fares, but children's bus fares specifically, by 50%, and 66 and 2/3%.
Hey, Victoria, you're right on the topics this morning, sir. You're more concerned about the bus fares than do you want to re-elect Wolfe or do you want to elect the NDP to cut the bus fares?
I want to say another thing regarding big government. If he's against big government, why doesn't the BC government get out of the liquor control board business and put it in the hands of private enterprise?
Good question. Good question. Mr. Wolfe will tell you frankly and honestly why they cannot get out of the liquor business, won't you, Mr. Wolfe?
Well, if you can tell me how the public taxpayer can receive the appropriate revenues from that side of the economy in any other way, we'd be happy to listen to this. You find the same type of government involvement in the liquor administration in practically every jurisdiction that you approach.
What are the profits again from the liquor board? I can't find it in the budget.
I think it's probably about close to $250 million.
Yeah, $250 million.
Right, yeah.
That's why, obviously.
That's a very important part of our budget, and I think most people support that. You probably notice that we did not reduce the sales tax also on liquor products. I've been asked that question, why didn't we bring it down to 4%? The answer simply is that we don't rate that as a priority in terms of other things, so far as tax reductions are concerned.
That's right. Boozers must pay 7% for their luxury item. Thank you, sir. All right, fair enough. I'm not complaining.
Fine.
Disgusting habit. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Yes, ma'am.
I find the calling of the election absolutely disgusting, for number one. Number two, I think it's about time both federal and provincial make a set date for the voters in this country where people know when the election is coming, and maybe we could judge the performance of both governments equally as well. And as far as the brick shares are concerned, they're not worth the paper they're written on. I intend to put mine in my bathroom. I believe the NDP will have to continue on with them. I can't see them abolishing it because of the process that is now in progress. And I don't think it would be fair for our taxpayers' money to go down the drain like that. And as far as Mr. Bennett is concerned, he has sold out BC. His slogan of BC is not for sale, it's hogwash.
Mr. Wolfe.
I think you really should be concerned, though, that if the NDP were returned to power, as to what they would do with that Resource Corporation plan. They violently disagree in principle with the government selling off these assets in this manner. We disagree in philosophy, so that's why it's an important issue. I would question what they would do with that issue, notwithstanding the fact they've said that it's too late. If there was an election, as there is, before these shares are being distributed, there's a real possibility that they would throw out the whole plan, not distribute the shares, and change it all around. Because first in the House, when this bill was introduced to provide the legal procedure to distribute the shares, what was required, they refused to debate it this week.
That was this week?
This week.
How much money did you want in that bill?
The bill didn't provide for funds. The funds are in the budget for the distribution.
How much?
The total requirement estimated is $15 million.
$15 million.
Yeah,
and the NDP...
That's for the free shares.
In other words, if the NDP had voted quickly for that bill, you might not have been able to fight them quite so hard on it.
The point is not so much whether individuals want to receive these shares for which they'll pay nothing, but whether they want to see individual ownership of these resources in the process.
Speaking of semantics, I agree that they will receive these shares for which they as individuals have paid nothing, but for which they as taxpayers in British Columbia have already paid.
Any share distribution by a financial house costs a fair amount of money, particularly one as large as this.
Mr. Wolfe, may I ask you a question on that?
Certainly.
No, hold on, ma'am. After this break.
You can make the sun shine all over British Columbia this year in the Kinwin Lottery for the physically disabled. There's $100,000 first prize, and for the first time in Canada, a daily draw. You can win $100 every day, Monday through Friday, from April 2nd to June 29th. Kinwin is the Good Times Lottery. Kinwin means good times for you and better times for the physically disabled of British Columbia.
In the cookie crocs of Canada, big things are happening. The people who revolutionized...
Well, you told me, ma'am, how disgusted you are with the elections. So finish briefly.
Oh, yes. After all these shares have been distributed to all the people who wish to have them, what is would be the government's intentions to do with the remaining of them? Throw them out on the open market so dummy corporations could pick them up and were owned again by foreign enterprise?
No, immediately those shares are distributed, the government has no more involvement. It has no members on the board. It's completely out of those enterprises.
You still haven't answered my question.
Yes.
What's going to happen to those remaining shares?
The remaining shares which are not picked up, which would probably not be more than about 10 or 15% of the whole issue, will be vested in the government ownership. They will have a minor percentage of ownership in the company.
I'm not going to carry on with that argument.
Okay.
That'll develop through the campaign. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster. Mr. Evan Wolfe, you're looking mighty chipper this morning.
Yes, sir.
Social credit government's going to get right back in, do you? I was never so happy in all my life when I heard last night at work that Mr. Bennett called an election. I think it's high time we had it, and we're going to say goodbye to the social credit government and hello, NDP party.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you for your program. It's certainly...
Carry on with it.
However, I would like to ask the question to Mr. Wolfe. It's in regards to the distribution...
Of shares?
Again, yes.
No, I'll do that at other morning, the distribution of shares. It's going to be an election issue.
I would like to know, and it's very short, is there a limit after the distribution...
Once they go on the open market, is there a limit?
Of the number he can own?
Anybody can
1%.
1%. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. We'll hope you'll moderate that debate. But, Mr. Wolfe, I will, with a great deal of constraint, limit this comment to one field. Would you please give us your comment on the sale of Ocean Falls to Mr. Kruger of Quebec? If you get re-elected, when are you selling the rest of BC that's not listed in BRICS?
I'm not aware of these intentions. I understand it was on the news yesterday, and I have no comment to make. I've no knowledge of this plan.
To sell Ocean Falls?
No.
To Quebec?
No.
You possibly not be aware of such a thing if you're our finance minister.
Well, I just have no knowledge of this proposal that you're referring to.
Well, I guess
You haven't had to discuss anyone in the government?
I haven't, no.
Do you think it's likely?
I would say no.
You'd say no?
Yeah.
I guess the comment that was on the television last night that Mr. Bennett runs BC, not his cabinet.
No, that's not the point. There's just, I've heard of no proposal in this direction. Mr. Williston is the person who is responsible as the chairman responsible to that company, and I've not been in touch with him, so.
He can sell it if he wants to.
Pardon me?
Can he sell it if he
I think
wants
this would
to?
require government policy. No.
From Armstrong, go ahead, please.
Yes, I just got a short question to ask. I wondered how a member of the social credit government could go on the radio last night and say in the Okanagan that he was going to stand on his ability to create work when unemployment is over 20%.
Who was that?
Len Bautry. I just wondered how...
unemployment is over 20%? Where do you get the 20%?
Well, the last figures I heard, unemployment in the Okanagan.
On the Okanagan?
Yeah, in the Okanagan. Not in the province, but in the Okanagan. Our percentage of the...
Oh, I doubt that very much. There might be an individual spot where it could be very, very much that way. Unemployment is high, there's no question about it, but so is job creation. In 1978, this province created 14% of all of the jobs in Canada with a workforce of 11%. So, you can argue unemployment versus job creation. We're creating more jobs in British Columbia than practically any other province, and I'm just talking about the province-wide. So I think it's quite justified with what Mr. Bautry is alleged to have said.
Question, are you working or unemployed?
The figures are even worse in unemployment when you think about it, that a lot of the people in the Okanagan, I know a lot of people that I know personally, have gone to Alberta to work. So the population in the Okanagan has been cut down.
There was a tendency for migration towards Alberta about 2 years ago, particularly after the NDP regime here. And I think that this has been offset and is starting to move in the other direction.
Go ahead from Trail, please.
Thank you. What percentage of shares will the government own when these are all out?
I don't... What percentage of shares will the government own?
I say approximately 10 to 15%.
There's an incredible interest in this BRIC thing. Maybe you and Bennett are right that this is an issue.
Well, it involves everybody.
And to be fair to Barrett, to put it on the record, I suppose, what did he say first of all? First of all, he said that if there were an election and he got into power, he would...
Cancel it all.
Cancel it all.
That's what he said.
And then he said later on, Well, if there is an election and the shares will already be distributed, we might slowly buy back some of the shares on the market. And now he has said, no, you're too far ahead, or his people have said, you're too far ahead, the share distribution must go ahead, right?
Well, the second thing he said was that if the shares were distributed, he would buy them back or do something to get them back. That would refer to after they were distributed. But here we have an election during the distribution period.
And you're saying now you want the people of British Columbia to know that you'll give them the shares if they want them, but the NDP will cancel it. That's one of the major issues.
There's a strong possibility they will. They wouldn't debate the bill which provides for this. There's a substantial bill before the House. They wouldn't debate.
I think you're just nervously jumping in during the confusion, hoping that social credit will slip in all the federal confusion.
Jack, it's time for an election. You know,
in the middle of another one.
Well,
what about the
it's not
patience
in
of
the middle.
people?
Well, it's I don't see much difference whether you have it before or after, and perhaps more people would be frustrated if you had an election.
I can just imagine. I'm going to send Brian out to do some men in the streets throughout the province. Which way are you going to vote in the election? Which election? You know, it's going to be difficult. Now, what am I? 6. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello, Mr. Webster. Before I ask my question, I hope your station will give Vic Stevens and Mr. Barrett the 20 minutes time, the same as Bennett pulled on you last night.
I've no doubt it's a matter of considerable concern to those highly placed executives in our news organization.
To Mr. Wolfe.
Yes, sir.
But it was 20 minutes free time.
Now to Mr. Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe, in 1975, you put down on this paper 10 conditions that you would do for the people if they elected you. Okay, I won't read 10, I don't want to embarrass you, but I'll just give you 3. Preventive medical dental health program will be developed in cooperation with the dental profession. Number 1. Provincial income taxes will be eliminated for citizens 65 years of age and over on incomes up to $5,000. Property taxes will be removed, not partly, but will be removed for those in this age group too. Freedom of choice will be permitted in purchasing auto insurance. Not part of it, but full. I'll better give you one more. Income will be improved by directly linking it to the benefits of the cost of index living. Now, since the Shovelman got in, that was cut at $265, providing you were lucky enough to have earned...
Okay, you made 5 points. Preventive...
You don't want the rest of them, but that's enough.
No, I don't want the rest of them. That's enough to go on. Hold on a second, please. I've got to take a break. And then I'll deal with that gentleman, Mr. Wolfe, will after this message. Okay. I don't know whether this caller is pro or against you. I suspect he's against you. He wants to know about your campaign last time for provincial dental care, provincial
income
tax for those over 65, removal of property taxes, auto insurance, freedom of choice, and why no COLA on gain?
Just to deal quickly with these, there is an announcement now of an introduction of a dental care plan for all of those people who are not now currently on dental plans.
You're using it again, that's 4 years later.
Pardon me?
You're using that same thing again 4 years later. You've already used it in 75.
We've said that there's a bill being brought into the House to introduce this. There's discussions currently going on with the dental profession. That's our intention. If you re-elect this government, there's going to be a dental plan provided for. A comprehensive dental plan, which will hit at all the people who don't currently get the advantage of such plans, like through union contracts and so on. On personal income tax...
Well, the only point he's making is that you should have done it before.
You abused it to do that.
I think those commitments, sir, to really be fair, were commitments for the term of office or the mandate of this government. We're asking for another mandate to continue. It's not possible with the restrictions on the revenues available from the taxpayer to just do everything.
In other words, you weren't able to keep your promise first time round.
Well, the point is we're going to do it.
You're going to do it second time round. Okay, you've made a very good point, sir. Now, I don't want to go through all the others, but let's take this one.
Listen, personal income tax has been changed.
Will be changed.
It has since been changed.
Since been changed.
Yeah. In the case of a couple over 65, it is possible to have gross income of $10,500 without incurring any provincial income tax
When
liability.
this passes.
Yes, but previous to this also, there were other changes.
Okay, what about property taxes for over 65?
Yes, a great many people over 65 do not now, thanks to the increase in the homeowner's grant to the present level, which is $480, pay property taxes, but there are many people who can afford expensive homes who still pay property tax. And I don't think it should be expected that regardless of age, that a person living in a high-class home should have zero property taxes.
Well, why did you put it in here? You put property taxes will be removed for those in this age group who wish to continue to live in their homes at 65. Now, why do you put...
Within the means available, within the inflation involved in housing, this has been done, sir.
You asked people to vote for you, and you would do this. You have deceived the people because you have not fulfilled any one of these 10 conditions.
Do you pay property taxes now?
Look, listen to this one.
Yeah.
Government incentives to small business through low-cost loans. There are more people going bankrupt now than ever before. What did you do for the small business people?
Listen, we introduced a whole series of programs with low-interest loans during the past year, and these are being increased in the current year's budget. There's been, listen, we made important tax changes in terms of corporation capital tax, in terms of other taxes, which, in fact, in reducing the sales tax rates, I think affects small business perhaps more than most any other category. We have made improvements for the small business.
You made your point strongly, sir. Yeah. Now, when it comes to automobile insurance, again, we're in this fairyland of what's going to happen. Do you really think, and you're an automobile dealer by trade, and I'm not using that in a snide manner, do you really think that you can bring in a non-discriminatory rate on driver and experience alone without classifications for age? Do you really think it can be done?
Certainly it can be done.
You've promised it.
Yes.
It might mean that some youngster with a couple of accidents will pay $2,000 a year for his insurance, mightn't it?
Well, it couldn't be that much. But,
it could be a lot of money.
It'll represent a shift in the premium schedule, but we're just saying that there shouldn't be discrimination due to the location, sex, or age of a person. So this is the intention of the
government. If I live in a
government.
little farm in Greenwood, British Columbia, where there are no accidents to speak of, or certainly not the massive accidents down here,
right?
I'm going to get away with a fairly low premium.
If you have no accidents, we're just saying accident-free, you should be able to enjoy the same rate as anybody else if you're accident-free.
With the number of accidents we have, an awful lot of people are going to have awful high premiums.
There's been predetermined actuarial basis for determination. That's right, yeah. This is going to take time to organize.
And if you are re-elected, and if you implement these things, do you think the private companies will pick up this non-discriminatory insurance rate?
I fully expect they would.
I don't see how they can.
Well, they're participating now, of course, and mostly in the additional coverages. So
you'd really like to junk ICBC altogether.
No, I think it's as long as it's performing this function for basic coverage, and as long as we have compulsory necessity to have auto insurance, it's probably performing a service. But
you're not very enthusiastic about the long-term future for ICBC.
I can't answer that question. It's being well run at this stage, and I think it's providing efficient, low-cost insurance.
Okay, time for a couple more calls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. First of all, I'd like to say that Mr. Wolfe is aptly named. I believe that the Socred Party is calling the election at this time to, as you mentioned a wee bit earlier, to cloud the election within the federal election time. And I might add that when they came into power, I set up a business 3 months prior to their coming into power. 6 months later, I had to close down because of increase in sales tax and the ICBC rate. So if that's their attitude to small business, I hope the NDP supporters come out in full force and send these boys back to the car lot.
Yeah. I don't think the NDP have any private domain on small business, if I could say so. What kind of a business were you in?
He's gone. He hung up.
Gone? Okay.
Said his piece and hung up.
Yeah.
Duncan.
Yes, hello, Mr. Wolfe.
Yes.
I wondered if you were aware that when this brick company formed, shares were sold by stockbrokers at $9 a share, which are valued now at $3.91.
What shares were sold at $9?
That is the brick shares that are being given away.
No.
Well, there's no shares being sold now.
No.
They're simply being applied for. There's no price been determined. There's no market price at this stage.
Well, they were sold prior to this date.
Ma'am,
No,
they
they're not.
weren't.
They were first formed.
No. You're just wrong in that. Where from?
Powell River.
Powell River. Go ahead, please.
My question, Mr. Wolfe, is how can you afford to cut 1% or 20% off the sales tax and still cut down the help to hospitals? Evidently, hospitals are suffering from lack of money.
You've got the 5% freeze plus a $25 million one-shot grant.
Right. Well, I suggest it's not true. We're cutting down the monies which go to hospitals. They have difficulties balancing budgets, certainly, and there sometimes become public issues at a time of an election. We've increased the budget for hospital programs this year by close to $40 million. $40 million. It's now $649 million plus, as you say, we've allocated $25 million in addition to the minister to provide some stabilization in the situation where he feels it's needed.
In other words, whether a deficit...
So there's 40 plus the $65 million been added to the monies available to hospitals this year.
The $25 million is to meet those with deficits that they can't cover.
Well, and he has discretion in how it's going to be used.
He has. Bobby
yes,
Boy.
Yes.
Bobby
right.
McClellan.
Yeah.
So
we've asked the hospitals to use the same 5% limitation on their budgets, and obviously we're willing to listen with reason to extraordinary circumstances. But we're asking them, as well as regional districts, municipalities, all areas of local government, to respond to the need to try to keep the tax bill
Fair enough.
down.
Last point from you, caller.
Yes, it's easy enough to say all these millions, but the hospitals are actually running inefficiently for the lack of funds. I mean, I'm not...
Who can make that judgment? That's something that somebody... Who knows if anything's being run efficiently in this province?
Well, of course...
And I'm not just talking about your government.
In any year...
I'm talking about government.
Yes, right. In any year, hospitals, per se, have deficits.
Mr. Wolfe, forget your deficit for the moment. You're now on the campaign trail, right?
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you any particular members of the NDP you'd like to tackle 3-on-1?
Oh, sure. I could name you about a dozen.
Because we could make a real comic opera farce out of the whole business.
I'm sure you could, right?
Anyway, predict the outcome of the election for me, please. As if I didn't know.
I view the election as being a very close contest, and I think that there's a strong possibility that the social credit government will be returned, but that we're in a real battle, and I think people should realize that. They should not assume, if they are supporters of social credit, that it's going to be an easy fight or an easy victory, and therefore I think it's going to be close, but I think we will be returned.
Close, but you'll win the cigar.
Yes.
Evan Wolfe, Minister of Finance. Yeah. Webster on his own after Mr. Wolfe leaves now, and thank you, Mr. Wolfe.
Thank you.
Actually, I had hoped to have a videotaped interview with Premier Bennett on first thing this morning. And, you know, I'm not blaming anybody for the fact that it didn't come off, but I was down at the Four Seasons at 7:30 this morning. But his staff told me that he was too tired and he wasn't getting up until 8 o'clock. So I had me a cup of coffee with my crew in the Four Seasons and came back and gave you my own little shtick at the beginning of the program. Now, I know I'm getting kind of cynical about these kinds of things, but I'm not very happy about this provincial election either way. I don't think it's fair to the voters, regardless of their stripe or their shade or their wishes, or even for that matter, their apathy. And one caller who phoned this morning said, why can't we have a fixed election dates? And I'm inclined to think that if this kind of piggyback caper continues to happen, that there may well be a groundswell of the common people who will say, for goodness sake, let's have fixed election dates, except in the odd emergency case where a government is defeated on a non-confidence motion on a major issue. Because it's quite undesirable for the stability of this or any other province or this or any other country to have everybody holding back on industrial development, everybody holding back on all their plans, and I'm talking about the big money boys as well as the middle-sized money boys, until one politician, whoever he happens to be, gets up on the right side or the wrong side of the bed one morning and says, hey, we're going to have an election, Thursday, May 10th. Because, you see, as it stands now, and this applies exactly to Trudeau and Lougheed as well as Bennett, they pick the election date to suit their personal political opportunism. No other reason. It's never picked for the good or the stability of the country or the province. It's picked on the boys in the back room doing the little phone polls and saying, hey, if we slip in now and create a couple of straw men, we'll get back into power, and power is the name of the game. We want the power. But we're intelligent people, the average, ordinary Joe citizen of Canada or British Columbia. And, you know, we have an election. We've got an Elections Act which allows governments to go for 5 years, as long as they have the confidence of the House. But we never go for 4 years, far less 5 years. We go for 3 years, 3.5 years. Trudeau, for instance, has been putting us through in the most unmitigated way since early last spring. Now we're going May 22. Now we're going May 10. Now we don't know who's voting for whom in which election or what's it all about. And this brick thing is going to drive us all crazy. We better get the issues down to simplistic, straightforward points. But we can't get them down to straightforward points until we've re-established the NDP position. You can see how social credit is taking a very firm position. And they're saying, if we are not elected, you won't get your 5 free brick shares. If we are not elected, you won't get the sunshine budget. Well, I'm open to correction on this. I think this is the first time I can remember anyway, where a budget has been introduced and wham, the House prorogued, and we go to the public with the bribes in our hands. Not peculiar to social credit, peculiar to all our politics, but it's the kind of behavior which inclines to make people somewhat cynical towards the democratic process. It certainly makes me cynical. And I'm still laughing. You know, when I saw Premier Bennett last night on the NewsHour coming up straight-faced with this proposition of 3 and 1 that's fair, I thought he was going to burst out laughing. But he means it. I don't suppose Bill King meant it when he mentioned the other 2 gentlemen, former cabinet ministers, who have had their troubles in the recent past and the dim and distant past while they sat on the social credit side of the House. It's the kind of thing that brings a whole political process into disrepute. Not the convictions, the continually casting up on these kind of cheap shots. Where am I? Take a break. Thank you. Hold on. Well, I've just been filling myself in on the detailed procedure as of last night, you know. And I don't like the way Premier Bennett called this election at all. On a little bit of reflection, I didn't like it to begin with. And now I hear that the legislature were the last people to hear about the election. The House rose at 6 o'clock. Dennis Coke got up, drew attention to 6 o'clock. Gardy Gardam got up and said the House would sit again at 8 o'clock. Bennett went to the media conference, got his 20 minutes announcing the election, and still the legislators did not know. When some of them came back at 8 o'clock, they got a little note signed by Jerry Cross, the Deputy Provincial Secretary, telling them the House has been prorogued. Cleaning staff were in the legislature at this time. And will you kindly please return to me at your earliest convenience any complimentary transportation passes issued in your favor? Now, surely, the people who should be told first, even before the all-important media, that the House is being prorogued are the members of the House. I think that was, who cares about niceties, but that was a gaffe. Gaffe, G-A-F-F-E, accent, acute. Really, Mr. Bennett, That wasn't very nice of you. That was unmannerly, to say the least, under our parliamentary. Thanks for the information. I'm on the air, by the way. Bye. Did I get that right? Did I give an accurate report? Thank you very much. Bye. That was Secret Agent X. Where am I now? Just as well I got some friends, because, you know, most of the time I'm stuck here. Managed to get downtown. Going to Victoria is a major expedition. I mean, I just hate walking across on the water. Go ahead. That's a joke. The trouble is you can't see people laughing except Freddie, and he doesn't count. Go ahead, please.
Jack Webster?
Yes.
Yes, I have a prediction.
What's your prediction?
Social credit government are going to get in with a bigger majority.
Good.
Would you like to make a $100 bet, Jack Webster?
No, I don't gamble. I'm against sin. I don't drink. I don't smoke.
Webster.
And I don't gamble.
Teamsters strike. You missed the whole point. I'm a casual worker.
You're a casual worker.
Into the
a lot of people around here are casual workers too. Very casual.
Webster, and I'm a semi-trailer truck driver.
Semi-trailer. I hope you don't drive it casually.
In an office, fanning my face and looking around trying to find something to do. I work. No, I have to go down to Yukon in second.
You want a $100 bet?
Yes, Webster.
Try somebody else. Duncan. Again, Duncan.
Again, Duncan.
Things are live in Duncan this morning. 2 people on the telephone. Go ahead, please.
Jack, I happen to be aligned with the Liberal forces in B.C.
Aligned with what?
The Liberal forces in the provincial.
Oh, you're a masochist.
Well, no, I just didn't like your statement at the opening that the Liberals didn't matter. Because if it is a close election and the Liberals elect a few members, they might hold the balance of power. And your statement about they didn't matter in B.C. maybe all turned around.
Oh, I think you're being a little bit. Well, when I see Vic Stevens telling us last night with great fervor and force that he can win the government, I begin to wonder about him.
We're not saying we can win the government. Don't get us wrong. But we do say...
Jevington will not win a seat, I don't think, in British Columbia.
You do not think...
I don't think Jevington will win a seat.
I think Jevington will. I happen to be his campaign manager.
Oh, I knew there was a reason. Well, give Jevington Tuttle my best regards and commiserations.
I hope you'll give him some equal time.
I always give everybody equal time.
Okay, and
Thank you. Campaign manager. What gall and arrogance. Where am I? Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Hello there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry I missed Mr. Wolfe. I had a couple of questions I'd like to have asked him. Maybe it...
Just give me your reaction to the election. I don't want to talk about brick shares.
Pardon?
Give me your reaction to the election call.
First, the social credit has been sniping at NDP for years, about $100 million in the hole. Now, there's a couple of questions I'd like to have asked them. First, on the ICBC, how many are steadily employed since the ICBC started?
How many are what?
How many are steadily employed?
Thousands of them.
And
thousands. They're almost as well paid as the striking workers up at
on the
Outside.
market value of all the claim setters.
Sir, you are not on the topic at all. Let's be quite brutally frank with you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, madam.
Now, I'd like to have a real good suggestion for you. I think the 3-in-1 debate should be on Bennett's side, Mr. Robert Summers, who was convicted, and Mr. Jack Davis, the same. And then we'll make it kind of an even match, and I think that would be a good deal. And furthermore, I'd like to say I don't believe Mr. Evan Wolfe and his finances. And Mrs. Morrison, who is the Auditor General, wasn't really too happy about his finances.
She said a plague on all their sloppy houses.
I agree, but they're trying to claim that they're the ones who keep their financial house in order, and I disagree. And I think it's wrong to go to the public with an election right now. I was enumerated, Mr. Webster, about a month ago. And the only way I found out it was an enumeration was I asked the man, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to enumerate."
That was routine, ma'am. That was not a tip on the election.
Well, it was to me.
But anyway, you're against it. As a good NDPer, you think you're liable to get beaten this time.
I'm a good NDPer, but I think fair is fair, and they should play fair.
Thank you. You think it's unfair to call the election now. I'm inclined to think it's chintzy. But mind you, as I say, the reason they call elections is at the time they think they can win regardless of the public appearance of any niceties like telling the legislature first or making a 20-minute campaign speech. Go ahead, please. Victoria.
Yes, Mr. Webster. Could you tell me, please, if there is any electoral provision for some type of a special vote for the boys that are out the Navy? they'll be away until the 17th of May again in Far East?
No, I think they're.
Franchise left?
I'll find out later on, love, when I have an election official on. Webster, after this message. I speak to Kamloops. I merely want to say in the direction of Kamloops, happy birthday, Alexis. Happy birthday, Alexis. It is her birthday.
Good morning, Jack.
Good morning from Kamloops. If you see Alexis, tell her I was wishing her a happy birthday.
Okay, I will.
Right.
Who is Alexis?
She's my granddaughter, lives in Kamloops.
Oh, I see. I'd like to say goodbye to Mr. Bennett and Mr. Wolfe and wish them a lot of success in their businesses that they have right now.
Are you the NDP candidate in Kamloops?
No, not really, no.
The campaign manager, perhaps?
No, not at all. Just an average person that's working and getting a little fed up with what's going on.
Yeah, but are you dedicated anyway, or have you changed your mind because of some particular thing?
Oh, no, I'll back Mr. Barrett. I think he's doing the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Prince George.
Hello.
Prince George, speak up, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
I just want to know, like they say, the unemployment.
Sorry, can't take the call. Something happened on that one. It was okay in your phone, Linda, but no, not okay in mine. Perhaps you could assure the gentleman we are not being rude or brusque on that one occasion. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jack.
Yes, yes.
Morning. I was too bad I couldn't get too soon earlier, but I sure think this is a cheap shot that Bennett's taken this trip on the election. Because what he's done, he knew darn well what was coming up. He's turned around, he's drafted some bills, and he said, here you are. We'll give you the 4%, which was nothing, on your sales tax. He's given us the shares that actually belong to the people of BC in the first place. He hasn't given us nothing there. And he's turned around and said, now here you are, you can have this only, mind you, only if you vote me back in. Now, and he's called it in between two, so everybody's really going to, the Fed.
That's what I said this morning.
That's right, and,
it's going to finish up in a bidding battle for your vote by bribery.
Right, and he must believe that the people in BC must be very ignorant to do a thing like that, because
I can use for you.
To him last night, my God, I had thoughts too, but I know where they're going now, and that's strictly NDP.
You always did vote NDP. Don't try and con the troops.
I have voted Conservative and Liberal because I voted for.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I must say I'm a little perturbed myself. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I moved to BC about 5 years ago, and I've never been able to understand one thing.
What's that?
Well, every time an election comes around, each one says that the other is so much money in debt. And I've always wondered, why with our resources are we always in debt? Maybe you can't answer that, but I'd like to know.
It depends who keeps the books.
Uh-huh.
And I find it quite unworthy of time to attempt to interpret what the NDP says about the social credit balance at the end of a term and what social credit says about the NDP balance at the end of the term. I've gone through this more years than I care to think about.
Okay, thank you.
And I try and keep my mind free of these overly confusing pieces of double talk which come from all around us.
I just wish it could be explained to me, that's all.
It cannot be explained, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's easier to explain M equals EC squared. What is it? What is it? E equals MC squared. That's much easier to explain.
Thank you.
Ask Einstein if you can find him. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. How are you today?
I'm in remarkably ebullient form.
Well, I'll be brief. I heard you talking about Vic Stevens, and a couple of days ago I'd agreed with you, but I've been talking to some NDP friends. I'm not NDP, I'm social credit. But a lot of my NDP friends are going NDP federally and conservative provincially, and I can't figure that out. But
No, neither can I, ma'am, and I'll try and do it during this break. Thank you. Bye. As far as I was concerned, that was the opening gun in the provincial election campaign, which will culminate with the full BC TV coverage on the night of Thursday, May the 10th. And you see what the issues are. Press were told first it's going to be a question of brick shares, natural resources, and I don't think there will be a straight face-on, one-on-one debate between Barrett and Bennett, although I certainly would like to see it, and we would be delighted to give the time and to moderate it, I'll tell you. Linda, tomorrow.
Dave Stupich talking about election and budget, and Pauline Jewett.
Oh, Pauline Jewett?
Yes.
That'll be good fun anyway. I think Pauline's kind of annoyed at me. So we should have good fun tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. precisely.